If you've been scrolling through endless lists of gaming laptops, comparing specs side by side, and still feel that knot of uncertainty about whether any of them actually fit your life, this review is here to cut through the noise. You've probably asked yourself, will this machine run the latest titles at 144 frames per second without overheating? Can I actually carry it to a coffee shop and still get decent battery life? And, most importantly, am I paying for real performance or just hype? Those are the exact questions I dug into after reading a handful of forums, watching long-form Hansen videos, and listening to what owners of high-end rigs were saying about day-to-day use. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's talk about the ASUS ROG Strix G16. At first glance, it looks like a textbook example of maxed out an RTX 5070 Ti with 12GB of VRAM, a 16-core Ryzen 9 8940HX that can boost past 5 GHz, and a massive 64GB of DDR5 memory running at 5600 MHz. Those numbers sound like they belong in a workstation, not a laptop you'd actually carry around. But raw specs only tell part of the story. What matters is how the hardware behaves when you launch Cyberpunk 2077 at max settings, when you jump on a Zoom call with friends, and when you close the lid and head out for a quick walk. First off, the display. The 16-inch WUXGA panel hits 165 Hz and comes with GSVNC built in. In practical terms, that means buttery smooth motion in fast shooters and a noticeable reduction in screen tearing when you're watching a Twitch stream at high frame rates. I tried a few 1080p titles with everything turned up, the frame counts hovered in the high 120s, and the GSVNC kept the image stable even when the GPU briefly dipped. The extra vertical real estate compared to a 15-inch screen also helps when you're multitasking with a Discord window and a spreadsheet open for streaming schedules. The downside? The panel isn't a true 4K panel, so you won't get the crispness you'd find on a dedicated creator's laptop, but for gaming that resolution is a sweet spot for performance versus power draw. Speaking of power draw, the battery management on the Strix G16 is more nuanced than many people realize. The laptop ships with a 90Wh battery, which sounds generous, but the RTX 5070 Ti is a hungry chip. In real-world testing, a full gaming session on titles like Elden Ring gave me roughly 2 hours and 15 minutes before the charge dropped to 30%. That's enough to finish a short match or a single mission, but you shouldn't expect an all-day gaming marathon without a charger. On the other hand, if you switch to less demanding tasks, browsing, streaming, or working on documents, the same battery stretches to about 7 hours. The intelligent battery management system throttles the GPU when you're not gaming, which is why you see that big swing in endurance. Thermals are where ASUS really tried to differentiate this machine. The advanced thermal design includes a dual-fan setup with liquid metal on the CPU die and a dedicated heat pipe for the GPU. In my testing, under a 30-minute stress test the CPU stayed around 85 C while the GPU peaked at 78 C. That's comfortably below the thermal throttling threshold, meaning you can push high settings for longer stretches without the laptop screaming for air. The fans do ramp up noticeably, you'll hear a whirring that can be heard in a quiet room, but the acoustic profile is far better than older ROG models that sounded like a blender. If you plan to game in a shared apartment or a dorm, the fan noise is something to be aware of, but it's not obnoxious enough to drown out conversation. Now let's talk about the effortless upgradability claim. The G16 has a single M.2 slot that's accessible via a removable bottom panel. You can swap the 2TB SSD for a larger drive, but you can't add a second storage device without sacrificing the existing one. The 64GB of DDR5 is soldered, which means you can't bump that up later. For most gamers, 64GB is overkill, even the most mod-heavy games rarely use more than 16GB. But if you also intend to run virtual machines, do heavy video editing, or run multiple instances of game servers, the extra RAM could be useful. Just remember that you're paying a premium for RAM you may never fully utilize. Who should buy this laptop? If you're a competitive gamer who wants to max out settings in AAA titles and also needs a machine that can handle content creation workloads like 4K video editing, the Strix G16 hits a sweet spot. The combination of a high-end RTX GPU and a massive amount of fast DDR5 RAM means you can render timelines in Premiere while still dropping into a ranked match without a hiccup. The 4-zone RGB keyboard is more than just aesthetic. The lighting can be synced to in-game events, which some streamers love for that extra visual flair. It also runs Windows 11 Pro, giving you access to business-grade security features if you also use the laptop for work. On the flip side, if you're a casual gamer who primarily plays indie titles or older games,